All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. As always, I am Billy Bateman, your host, and today I am joined by the one and only William Tyree, CMO at Revenue.io. How you doing, man?
I am always better when I'm talking to you, Billy. So it's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, man. Good to see you. I'm excited we can do this. You guys just rebranded, and that's exciting. And congratulations on that. So we'll give you a chance to talk about that. But before we talk about the rebrand, let's talk about you. For those people that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career, how you got to where you are as CMO.
Sure, absolutely. I think like a lot of people in marketing, I didn't go to school for that. I never dreamed I would be probably in technology. Actually, I just wanted to be a novelist, and I thought that the fastest path to do that would to be a university professor. And I imagined I'd have like all this time in the summers to write these great books. And I actually started down that path. I taught at the university level for about 6 years. Spent 3 of those years in Flagstaff, which is like not that far from where you are geographically.
Wow, yeah.
And I loved it. It was great. But then I got stuck on one of those university committees, where I was, everybody's got to do it, where I
Yep.
was editing a linguistics journal. And I was just like, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I wasting my life? And so just to make it interesting for myself, I decided to digitize it. So it was like a digital transformation project for, all these linguistics fans around the world. And anyway, I just came home one day and I had only been married for a year. I told my poor wife, I was like, I know you thought you were marrying a professor, but I actually think I want to be in Martech. And she was like, "What's that?" And so, but thankfully, she was understanding. We're still married all these years later, and honestly, it was that one crazy, horrible university committee that threw me into digital transformation. And from there, I kind of, like a lot of people in marketing, I started, as a content manager, as a copywriter. Writer, worked my way up at agencies, working client projects and things like that. Just gradually kind of worked my way up into kind of management, uh deploying marketing automation and building out workflows and stuff like that. And then one day I got lucky. I hooked up with the folks at Revenue.io, formerly Ring DNA. And just it was one of those kind of very hands-on, two people marketing departments with zero budget. And the great thing about that is you really get to learn a lot. And it just, for me, it's just about constant learning and trying to make an impact.
Awesome, man. I love it. I love it. We all have, I think we all have those moments where, like, is this really what I want to do for the rest
Right.
of my life early on in your career? For most people, I think early in their career, like you start doing something, you're like, actually, I don't think this is really what I want to do. And
Right.
like my wife, when we were dating, I was working in commercial real estate, and I went back to school, and the plan was go back in and just keep moving up the ranks there. And I realized I don't want to do that, and so we went down this whole tech and marketing path. And my wife was pretty cool. She was like, "Yeah, if you're not happy, like let's do something else." So
That's awesome. I know. And look at you now. I mean, you're a marketing expert. You've got this awesome podcast, and you're an ops expert too. You probably would have picked that out in a million years.
no, no, not at all, man. So tell us about it used to be Ring DNA, now Revenue.io.
Yep.
Tell it for those that don't know about what you guys do. Like, give us the rundown and what's new at Revenue.io.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the short story is, we optimize high performing teams with, real time guidance. I think that, you know, what sales teams, CX teams, marketing teams, they use our platform for customer engagement. And then what we do is, we capture all the engagement data, we analyze it, and then we surface and recommend what works best in, key moments. So, like examples of that are, let's say that you're a sales rep and you're an SDR, hardest job in
Yeah.
America, I think, right? And
Yeah.
you're pounding the phones, and you get somebody on and they ask you a really tough question about a competitor. The revenue.io will actually, recommend what to say. It'll pop some battle cards, some talking points, in real time. Same thing for, any kind of sales objection. So, and those kind of that kind of advice can be tailored toward, conversations along the opportunity pipeline. It's all different for every path, every business. But then also think, just, other example is, say you are a sales manager and you're trying to figure out how to coach your team. It's next best actions just throughout your day, in terms of, hey, you might want to pay attention to this or to that, or, here's somebody who's really crushing like a benchmark that they put in front of them. Pay attention to this. So, just really what we're trying to do is eliminate guesswork, and just reveal what works.
I love it, man. I love it. SDR, I agree. It is extremely tough job. Even being an AE, not an easy job to do
Right.
at all. Like when other people are like, man, why do the AEs have such this big upside on earning? It's like, well, you go do that job and you can,
Right.
see if you can make it. So I love it,
Totally.
man. So we wanted to talk about today, we had a few different ideas, but the one we really liked was, how do you make data driven decisions that influence revenue as the marketing team? Like we all know, hey, if you don't produce the leads, sales is not going to be happy. They'll be the first ones to let the leads are no good or there's not enough. But how do you use data to really make the decisions that are going to influence revenue, not just the leads? Because we can get really short sighted, I think, in just, oh, we got to produce X number of leads, but are they the good leads? So I'm going to just leave it to you for a minute. And, this is your philosophy on what we can do. And what do you think, or where do we start with that?
Yeah, I think that my answer to that, by the way, it's an awesome question. And I think my answer to that question would probably be slightly different, almost like every couple of years you would have asked me over the last decade.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one of the really significant things is that anybody entering marketing now doesn't have to deal with is like a war between sales and marketing in a B2B environment. If you kind of look at, I mean, we're really in what most people are calling a RevOps era right
Yeah.
now, where people are like, hey, how can I make it so that marketing, sales, and success really kind of focus as one entity? Essentially, that's just all going to the same goal, because life is better for everybody when you're operating that way. If you're all looking at the same data, it's better. And it just makes all the sense in the world for efficiency. And the data pretty much proves out that even if you're organized like that, from a company standpoint, with the common targets, common goals, that you tend to do better. So I think that's great. But I mean, let's talk about a couple specific examples. I really think it's all about those kind of insights and sharing those. Um, I run a super transparent program. So, every 2 weeks, the marketing team, most people in the marketing team, they'll present a couple slides, and it's an open meeting where anybody from the company can show up. And I think that a lot of people, that might sound like a nightmare,
Yeah.
but it's actually kind of amazing, because what we do is I make sure, like, our head of RevOps is there, our the SDR director is there, our VP of sales is there, and they're all there. And it's cool because, yes, we're presenting what we're working on, but the good news is we're presenting common goals, right? Hey, here's a campaign we're all working on. Here's some operational steps that we're all working on. Sometimes it gets really wonky, Billy. Like, it's like, hey, the MQL definition, we worked together to redefine it so our lead quality would be higher. And
Yeah.
like today, actually, it was one of those things where in that meeting, I said, hey, look at this. It looks actually like the ratio of marketing qualified leads to meetings it has actually like improved by double digits since we made a couple changes. And those people are all in that meeting so that we can all then like say, well, why do we think, what do we think is making that impact? We can kind of look at
Yeah.
the data. So I think part of it's transparency and part of it is actually having like the data that you all share so you have a common view of what's going on.
I agree with you on that, So we don't do a dedicated marketing meeting, but every week, marketing, sales, customer success, we all share our metrics and anyone can ask questions. And sometimes the questions I'm like, wow, I would have never thought to ask that question. And you just get a new set of eyes and you got anyone in the companies there and they all have different questions. The engineers sometimes they'll ask the best questions and they're not even marketers. So
Completely.
let me ask you this: which metrics and what kinds of data do you like to look at that you found at least like 10 years ago is probably different than now, but in the last year or two, what have you found like I need to look at these numbers to really have a good idea of are we driving success?
Yeah, I think that one thing that's super important for us is actually segmentation in terms of business size. So, for example, I know almost every B2B marketer is like looking at how much pipeline they're driving, how
Yep.
many qualified opportunities they're driving. For us, I think we figured out certain things with the business in terms of sweet spots of company sizes that we want to be selling to.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's like, yeah, great. We drove pipeline, we drove some deals, but what size are those deals? Like, is there a correlation between all the way down to the kind of the lead level versus the meeting level and the opportunity and then close revenue? Like, is there consistency throughout? And really kind of looking at those, the size of business we're driving and the size of the opportunities. So that's a really big one that is not important to every business, but I think it's it's a really good thing to pay attention to. It's kind of like the ultimate extension of where you start marketing, which is looking at personas.
Yep.
What's our ideal customer? But then being able to kind of track that with metrics all the way through is really powerful.
Yeah, I think a lot of us think, we have these personas like this is our ideal customer. But when you get down to the data, like who actually turns into your customers, so like do you actually have it right? Is something I always like even with our own data, I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I think we have it right, but I see some outliers, that they don't check the boxes we were talking about.
You're totally right. And look, sometimes those outliers can be really illuminating, I think. Like I've been in a couple situations where you see outliers and sometimes it's fool's gold because
Yeah.
sometimes people get excited and they're like, "Oh my god, like, we just closed all these deals in manufacturing or whatever it is, right? Let's marshal resources toward that because it's an underserved market." And sometimes that's really a great thing to discover. It's ultimately kind of a team decision. On the other hand, sometimes you're right. The outliers can you know kind of can kind of prove your strategy right or wrong either way once you kind of look at it long term.
Yeah. So it sounds like company size, when you guys segment, you arrived at that as a huge indicator, probably maybe one of your top indicators. How did you get to
Yeah.
that where you realized it's not necessarily industry or age of the company or location? It's really company size that we gotta dig into and tailor things to.
I think that there's again, every business is different, but I think that that for us, there's a huge part of of being able to sell into companies with a at least a reasonably mature operations team, right? And that's because I think it's value. It's about value. I mean, like when one of the things that people really like about revenue.io is that like if your goal is to give your entire company a common view of the customer and be able to say like, hey, we had engagement with a support rep over here with that customer, I need to make sure that marketing on this is on the same page be able to create sort of predictable, predictive insights on those kind of things. That
Yeah.
I think for operations, people are really going to kind of appreciate it. So I think for us, it's just about kind of looking at who do we make impact for beyond just like the obvious.
Yeah.
And for me, like that's amazing because operations people, like in most B2B organizations, those are the real heroes that
Yeah.
are really kind of like making everything possible, making everything happen in this kind of data, first world. So for us, it's really like, hey, what's a reasonably mature company look like in certain industries where the people who actually like are owning your product can really kind of appreciate it. Um, so for us, that was a really big decision point.
I like it, man. I like it. So, what advice do you have for anybody that's like maybe new to a role on a marketing team and they're like, okay, like I have some data. Who knows how good it is, but I have some. Um, how am I gonna use this to make decisions on do we focus on content or, paid search or just some classic email and demand gen? Um, what advice do you have for anybody trying to get more in this data driven mindset if they're not already there?
I think the first thing is really basic, which is divorce yourself from the idea that you're going to use the data to tell a story internally. So,
Okay.
for example, I think that that's one of the common mistakes I see from maybe early career marketers is they're looking for. It's almost like they're in high school or college and they're writing an essay, and they're looking for like evidence that the story's adding up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things where it's really hard to get away from that. But what it gives us is it gives us optimism bias. And I think it's more like, let's go into it more like an anthropologist or more like a scientist and
Yeah.
say, hey, let's go in without any preconceived notions and say, like, what is really working, what is not working, and what are we not sure about? And by the way, it's okay to not be sure about 80% of things at the beginning. Those lead to follow-up questions like, okay, what do we need to measure so I can be more sure about those things?
Yeah. I love it, man. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. A lot of us we are like, okay, here's the story we're going to tell. Let's find the data and we may adjust the story a little bit depending on what the data tells us. So how do you and I think it's human nature like we want to tell stories. That's what
Yeah,
people do.
right.
Um how do you get in that mindset of like an anthropologist when you've got this data?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a basic questions list essentially. Is like saying, okay, like, what does this appear to show? What might it show? And what can we learn from this? You
Yeah.
know, and then I think there's also a consultation with other people, and this is what we were talking about earlier about having some really good partners, across other departments, hopefully, ops team or, analysts around the company or sometimes even finance can be an unlikely seeming partner where
Yeah.
somebody, if you've got a controller you trust or a VP of finance you trust and say, hey, I just love you to take a look at this and see what conclusions they draw. Because, you were saying before that sometimes like developers with their mindset, they
Yeah.
typically have a more scientific mindset. Sometimes they have some of the greatest questions or greatest recommendations. I
Yep.
think it's really kind of saying, look, we're the creative, often we're the kind of the creative folks that kind of like then got into science, you know,
Yep.
um, trying to look at like consult some of those more numbers first people and see what conclusions they draw. I think that's a great way. And then gradually we kind of get trained as marketers to be a little bit more like them. And then hopefully you get kind of this ambidextrous brain going where you've got the creative and the analytical kind of going back and forth all the time.
Yeah, I love the idea of bringing somebody in who's not even in marketing or sales and just saying, okay, here's what I've got. What do you think's working or not working, or what do we find out of this? I love that idea. Oh man, that's a good one. So before I let you go, William, is there any question that I should have asked you but I didn't about this?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I'm more curious to ask you a question, which is like,
Okay. Yeah. Ask me a question.
you've had a long career. Like, what are some of your favorite kind of insights that you try to draw from data that to try to make, things go better in a B2B organization?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think some of the thing I like what you're talking about, like bringing in people that are not really close to the situation and not necessarily a stakeholder when you're unsure what to do is really good. Like you got to trust them, but I have a similar thing, whether it's marketing or just like, hey, what should we do on our customer success or something like that, bringing in somebody from the outside to just say, here's what's going on. Maybe you have data, maybe you don't. Maybe you just are like, this is what we're seeing. We don't have any hard numbers, but this is going on.
Mhm.
And getting a perspective of somebody who's just fresh to it, that helps a lot whenever you're trying to solve problems. And like business is just constantly solving problems and challenges. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Another thing is, just be open, like you were saying, to not necessarily know the answer and work backwards to it, but just say, okay, like there's obviously a problem at this point or this process, whether that's like we send the email, like from marketing, we've got a list. These look like our ideal buyer. We're making them a great offer. We put them in our drip campaign or whatever it is. And they're coming to the website, but nobody's doing anything, like,
Right,
or
right.
it's like the conversion rate is just so low that it doesn't like, are we wasting our time, you know,
Hmm.
going in and just being open to like, okay, does the landing page suck or does it even
Right.
match up with the email? Like these are the basic things as marketers. Like we kind of know to ask these questions, but you got to constantly go back and look at what you're doing and
Hmm.
say like, okay, we've been doing something maybe even for years and it's worked great at certain points and kind of worked, but is there something better we could be doing? Like, don't I hate when we get into the we've always done it this way, and even
Hmm.
that could be a year or 2 years, or for a longer lived organization, 10 years, like we've been doing this and it works. Like, but should we be doing it? Like, I think every so often you've got to come in and you've got to ask those questions. And like, sometimes the answer is yes, like we should keep doing this. And oftentimes it's yes, but we need to adjust here and here. And sometimes you just need to be open to like, even if it's like a founder who came up with this thing and it worked at one point, saying it doesn't work anymore. Like
Yep.
people are not responding to this. Like for whatever reason, like things have changed, like it doesn't work, and being okay saying, okay, like let's stop doing this and let's do something else and put our resources to better use. But you've got to always just be open to change and figuring out what is what is actually working and what's not working but has potential to work and what just doesn't have potential anymore.
Could not agree more. I absolutely love that. And I mean, when you said, well, we've always done it this way, that's got to be one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that there's definitely something to be said for consistency. If
Yeah.
something is working and it's still working, optimize it. But yeah, by all means, keep going. But you're completely right. And I think sometimes, that's why like a new person in a marketing organization can be so effective
Yeah.
is because they're not really tied to or emotionally connected to what worked in the past.
Oh yeah, I mean they are great. Whether and like if you're in an organization that use it, like you sell a SaaS product and you use your own product, whenever you have a new employee that you're putting onto your product, you should be asking them a ton of questions about what they think, because you've got like this 90 to 120-day window when they're like brand new and they're just like, oh well, I love this, but they'll be like, why doesn't it work this way? Like I think it should work this way. And that's some of the best product research you can get, I think, because you're not like at your customer's office seeing how they use it, But if you put down your own people, whether you've got a marketing or a sales product or even an accounting product, just like sit down, see how your own people use your product, and you can solve a ton of problems before they even get out to your users, or maybe they've been out there and your users have just become kind of like, well, this is how it works, and solve it and make their life a little easier.
Exactly. Love
So,
it.
oh, hey, William, dude, this has been great, and I hope you're able to get out and do some fishing, and then if people want to get in touch with you and continue the conversation, what is the best way for them to reach out?
They can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Yeah, I love getting engaging conversations from people there, so that's great. Also in Pavilion, if anyone's a member of that. So
Awesome. All right, William, we'll chat later, man.
thank you so much. Talk to you soon.